Welcome to comment in it.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh yeah, I'm Randy Puzo. I'm one of the founders of Zesty.io, lead tech guy. I love programming. I think JavaScript is an awesome language, and it does super cool things, and it's pretty much used in everything. Can't avoid it because it's the only option you have when you're working in a browser, at least today. So very passionate about it. Excited to show you guys something you could use in a real life example. So to get started, if you're going to be following along with me, like I said, you can have VS Code open. All you need is a single HTML document, so you can have an index.html, or you could work right inside of CodePen. That is your option. To show you guys what CodePen is, let's look at my pens. So this is CodePen. It's kind of nice. It just lets you do HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and then it shows you the output. There's also a console, which is also quite nice. So I'm probably going to use this unless it's acting weird, then I'll use something else. So the very first thing I'm going to show you about in JavaScript is how many people have used jQuery before? Raise your hands. I feel like jQuery is like the introduction. Everybody uses it. Everyone's touched it. It's typically when you become further in your programming career that you're like, screw jQuery. It's because it's pretty much just shortcuts to do what already exists. So query selector is how you access DOM elements.
Real quick, how do we connect to the internet? Am I the first one?
Oh yeah, good question.
I mean, if I'm doing it on VS Code, it doesn't matter. I won't need the internet. Well, actually, I will.
You will
use
for the
network.
Yeah.
That's the IO one.
Finding it right
Is
now.
it we?
I think it's WeWork guest. WeWork guest works.
It's we were a guest.
That was the old
Yeah,
one.
it's WeWork and. Wait, I think you posted it.
That one's open.
WeWork.
Oh, the WeWork guest is open SSID.
It is open? Oh, and you have the internet with it? Oh, okay, so we were guest. No password needed.
You have to sign up on their website, yeah.
Oh, really?
It says D# for readers. Do you need it? Yeah, I can find it.
It's capital P, ampersand, S.
Oh, it's the fake password.
Yeah.
Lol. Okay, so it's WeWork, and it is capital P, the @ symbol, lowercase ss, and then like that. It's the classic password, which is a great meme from WeWork. This is capitalized. My handwriting's bad. Let me just know if you got that. Anyone having trouble with the internet? All good? All right, let's get started. All right, so query selectors let you select any DOM element. So I'm going to be using a few words that DOM is the document object model. DOM elements or nodes are could be HTML tags. You may know these as different things, but like an H1 or a LI list item is a node, right? They can also be known as elements. The funny thing about JavaScript, CSS, and HTML is it's older than some of us in here. So it's been using different nomenclature along the way. And it's been shaping itself and becoming, and that's why some people love and hate JavaScript, because there's maybe 100 ways to do the same thing. And other programming languages like Golang, there's one way to do everything, and that's it. So That's why some people like other languages, but it's also why JavaScript is so awesome, because it keeps evolving. Whereas other programming languages don't really evolve as quick as JavaScript. So DOM elements, we're going to call those nodes. And nodes need to be selected in order to do something with it. So query selectors are the function names that let you access these nodes. And once you have a node, you can do things like change its styles, change its text, change its HTML. You can delete it. You can copy it. You can do lots of cool things with it. Essentially, it's what enables you to create a dynamic page in HTML. So there are two primary selectors that can be used. And the first one is called query selector. And it's literally like this, right? Document.querySelector. So I'm just going to walk you through what this means. So this right here, I'm setting a variable, and I'm just calling it my header. And document is the top level DOM element. So document.querySelector and h1. So query selector is called off of a DOM element. So you could actually, this could be like li, for example, but for the purpose of today, we're just going to search the whole entire document with a single query selector. So with a query selector h1 like this, if there are 5 h1s on the page, it's going to give you the first one and only that one, right? So this is really good if you're targeting one thing specifically, but if you're targeting something that's ambiguous, that say there's 6 h1s and there's no other way to target it, you're just going to get the first one back. That may or may not be to your benefit. I'm going to show you how I use that to my benefit during the WeWork example, but let's look at how we select all of the h1s if we want to do that, which is query selector all. You gotta love the languages is perfect, right? So same exact concept. I'm setting a variable called myListItems, document, which is my top level DOM element, and query selector all, and I can select li here, and I'd get back all my list items found that it found. The difference is that this is going to return me an array of elements, what they call a node list. So I'm gonna have to loop through. When I get this, I just can't access it directly. I actually have to loop through it. In JavaScript, there's a couple ways to do that. The way I'm going to do it is with a for each, which lets you go through each element inside of a list. So I'm going to show you the old school way that used to be used by everybody, just because it's fun and nostalgic for me particularly. So this one's called get element by ID. So an ID is something that you can set on any element, and it looks like this, right? Let me just go break line, a little bit readable. And IDs are supposed to be unique. The browser won't freak out if there's more than one ID, but then you'll have an ambiguous reference, which is bad. But get document by ID is simply same concept, top level DOM element, document, get element by ID, and then you just give it the unique ID name. Since I had this div my division, I would get back this object to work with. You don't have to do this. If you guys have used jQuery before, you probably have done this before with the query selector they have. jQuery just calls these things behind the scenes for you and interpolates the string that you give it and changes it to give you back what you want. Okay, so next is something called class list. This is a newer JavaScript tool that we have, which we didn't used to have, and coding back in the day was awful appending classes to things. That's why people coded a different way, because this is such a pain in the butt. So looking at class list, class list lets you select an element. So let's just say I have an element like h1, hello world. I have some CSS here, yellow background. And then in my JavaScript, I'm using my query selector. I'm getting my first h1, And then I can say, so I set it as a variable, my header. My header, class list, add. So class list like gives you this, it's an open toolbox. There's add, remove, toggle, and contains. So if I wanted to remove it, I could go like that. But it lets me add that dynamically. So I'm going to jump in the CodePen now and actually show you how this works. New pen. Where do I do that? Maybe I go here. Cool. All right, so I'm going to create my first H1. Hello world. So what's cool about CodePen is it will just start showing you even when you have errors. I'm going to create a CSS class. Is everybody familiar with CSS a little bit here? Yeah. And I'm just going to call yellow background and just really simple background yellow. And then in my JavaScript, I'm going to say var for variable. There's other ways to set variables too in JavaScript. I'm just going to stick to the old school var. I'm going to say h1 equals document dot query selector, and then in there h1, right? And if I want to see that I have my h1, I can console.log it. And then down at the bottom of CodePen, there's this console button. You can click that. And you can see it's console logging my incorrectly spelled hello world, which Chloe, you probably love that I'm very good at misspelling the hello world. So you can see that it's console logging my hello world. So I have access to that object. And now I want to say class list dot add, and then I'll do yellow background. That's because I spelled it wrong.
I can't see, sorry.
One of the most difficult things in coding is spelling things correctly and naming them. So as you can see, I just now if I CodePen will just refresh as you go, right? So now I could set other styles to this. Say if I want to set the color of the actual text to say white and give it padding. Right, so I can start to dynamically access and change this. Yeah, I also could have done this, right? I could have just said class like that and then comment this out. And I could still apply my class if I delete that. It's removing the class. But I'm showing you this because we're going to do things with this, say after we make a request somewhere, right? After the user has some input. And that's how we make our page dynamic. So let's say we want to try that query selector all. I'm just going to write some more HTML. I'll zoom in for that so you guys can see. So you can all see that I have 3 list items. So ULI is unordered list, and LI stands for list item. I could target each one and make the color red, right? Got it. So now I want to have a query select all, right? So to select all my LIs. Let's make that a true yellow background again. Whoa, we can't read that. Picking the most beautiful colors. for this example. Is that clear to read? I once worked at a sign shop when I was a kid, and they're like, yeah, the best thing to read is red on yellow text. I'm like, but it's so ugly. He's like, but everybody sees it. I'm like, oh man. So, good story. I still don't. You ever see a website with that? Never. Maybe back in the day. Like, click here. All right, so let's take a look at what just happened there. So, up top was an example of selecting one element, right? And I was using query selector, h1. And I say, all right, once I stored my h1, I gave it the variable name h1. I say h1 dot class list add yellow background. And I gave this li the color red. Let's see if I can give it another color blue or something. All right. And if I target it more, it should pick up.
Your yellow background's overriding, isn't it?
Yeah. See if I can. There we go. So CSS is weird. If you qualify things a little bit more, it'll take precedence. So I'm actually going to go like this. Blue background, blue color. All right, so what I'm doing is I'm making it even prettier. So now I have the blue background and the yellow background. And I just want to show you how a class list I can do this. I could say remove blue color, right? So I'm overriding that blue color. Does everyone follow what I just did there? Everyone good? So the next thing I go over is for each. I already did the for each, but I'll walk you through the concept. Is that anytime you have an array is a list of things. It could be objects, could be strings, could be numbers. The for each is going to let you do something at each step. Each one of those numbers will let you do something to it, right? So over here, I'm just going through each one, and I'm getting each object. So this is returning me this. I'm going to console log this for you, just to show you that this is like a list of objects. It's too long for the console. It doesn't like it. So that's what that looks like. Like it's a node list, right? This is when it's an array. It has an index of integers starting at 0 always. These are called the keys, and then the value in this instance is an object. It's a node object. If you're coding a lot of JavaScript, you're going to be using for eaches or for loops or each loops or maps quite often. It's very common. All right, let's get into the good stuff. Is this recap for a lot of people here? Is this all just kind of some maybe? Oop, just got a sneak peek of what was going to happen. All right, event listeners. This might be new to some people here. So in jQuery, you just add the click keyword. But the old school classic way, or the vanilla JavaScript way, is called add event listener, right? And the code looks like this. It doesn't look like that. That is how you add a color background. It looks like this. Did you bug test this, Chloe? All right, cool. So an event listener looks like this. So basically, you're going to take any node element that you have access to, and you add event listener. It's very literal. And the first variable that is passed is a string, and it's the type of event that it's listening to. So an event listener is listening to something the user does in the browser, whether it could be scrolling, it could be clicking, it could be dragging your mouse. There's focus. There's a ton of things, like things that you wouldn't even believe that you have access to. I've probably used like maybe 12 of them in my whole life, but there's like really cool things. After print, sure. Before print, before unload, change, right? Change, click, obviously, double click, drag. I probably use more than 12. Drag, start, drop, duration, end, error, focus, key down, etc. These are all events that can be listened to. And typically they're listened to on an element. You can also add it, so since your document is your top level element, you can add an event listener to your document, meaning that anywhere anything occurs, anywhere on the page, it's going to trigger, right? This could be very problematic. Say if you have a mouse drag over the document, it means that it's going to freak out and send thousands of events as a mouse drags over 1,000 pixels, right? A lot of cool stuff you can do, play buttons, etc. We're going to keep it simple and just use clicks. Keep showing you the end result here. Lots of tabs. So we're going to just keep going with this running example. The goal was to build on top of the things we're learning, and at the end we'll have something complicated. And if I started there, then it wouldn't be as awesome. It'd be overwhelming, I guarantee it. Add event listener. All right, let's just zoom in so you can see me code. Spelling these correctly is really important. So I'm going to use a keyword called this. This is kind of a classic computer programming thing. In jQuery, they make it weird. In jQuery, it looks like this. That's not proper. It's just this. So this means it's referring to the object it's accessing. So in this case, list item is this. So I can say this and do something with it. So on click, I could remove the yellow background, right? Let's see if that worked. Right? So there's even a really, really cool one with this, is toggle. Right? Now I can toggle this off. Now you can start to see like things are starting to get cool, right? That's right. See? All right. I can also do other things like alert, like hello world. I spelt it right. That's really annoying, right? Don't do that. But it's always good for testing. It's one thing, you never want to write like 1,000 loop and have an alert in it, or you never want to write an interval and have an alert in it, because then you'll need to kill your page. So watch this, mouse over, right? Ooh, right? Pretty cool. What's that?
Is your color red there?
I have this right here, so I can remove this. It's beautiful, right? So you can see how you can start to build video games with this type of stuff, right? You're laughing, but you could.
Yeah.
People have done it. They've done worse with JavaScript.
If it can't be done in JavaScript, it has. I think that's an adage.
Yeah. I don't know if there's anything that cannot be done in JavaScript. Maybe like heavy end computing, but I mean, I guess they have Node now. So, all right, let's get back to it. All right, so we covered each. We covered the event listener. Now we're going to look at creating an element. So this is when the code starts to get bigger. A lot more lines of code to do this. Takes a lot of lines of code to do this. When I say a lot, like 3. But still, it's a lot more than we've been doing one-liners up until this point. So we're going to create an element. So again, in our for loop, because we're going to keep doing everything in these for loops because it's fun to do that, I'm going to create an element. So I'm going to say var my L for element equals. So when you create an element, you target the document. And I think it's create element. Most things are literal, some things are not, so it gets confusing. I'm going to create a strong element. And my L dot, you can do things like enter text here and say strong element. And then you can append it to, so if you create an element, right, it's just you have that element, it's not anywhere inside the page. You need to append it to the page. So in order to do that, you have to write that. Most things are literal, like I said. This one's semi-literal. List item dot append child, right? That's a new word. And then my child is going to be my element. So now I have a strong element that's being sent. So if I inspect this code, you see my UL, my LI, and you see I have a strong element inside of it. So I just injected a new DOM element, a strong DOM element into my LI.
That's cool, because I used create element before, but I've used it with regular, like H1, span, things like that, and I thought strong was like bold, but that's pretty cool that you can do it with strong as well.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you can give it anything, and they'll make a node.
Wow.
Which is quite nice. So that's going to be used. So you don't even need to write HTML.
Right.
You don't need to do it. You need to do it traditionally for Google, for Google. There are other search engines, right? So other search engines and Google, they would read a document because memory and hard drives were very valuable, and they still are, just a lot cheaper. And they would read the HTML, and they wouldn't run JavaScript or anything. They'd just read the HTML, look at all the words, index it, and make it like a Dewey Decimal symbol that you could punch in some words. So all they do is you would have to have well-formatted HTML, otherwise Google couldn't understand your page. Now Google understands your page no matter how bad you write HTML, but they will penalize you if your HTML is bad, because they consider that if there's bad HTML, then this person is messy, and I give them less credit, right? It's like walking into someone's house and seeing their house is a mess, so you have a different opinion about them. That's how Google feels about your HTML. Not kidding. So make your HTML nice and clean, fast to load, and you're going to get higher page ranks. Yes?
Well, on that same note, I mean, this is taking it a level deeper, but what are your thoughts on if we're generating code with our JavaScript, like what about server-side rendering and trying to...
Yeah, so...
Because this is being rendered in our client, so their bot's just hitting your endpoint and it's getting this back. It's not really getting the HTML, right? Yeah,
so technically there's execution, right? If JavaScript is executing after the page loads, right? So I still think rule of thumb is if you want Google to index it, make sure it's there by the time they make the request. If you're relying on them to read, like there's a lot of people are like, nah, Google's smart enough. And it's like, no. Or maybe they're smart enough, but maybe they actually give you less credit for whatever reason, because you can manipulate the page. So if you're rendering stuff, right, you can manipulate the data on page to the user. At that point, you can personalize the data, right? So making a raw request with unpersonalized data is what Google wants. They don't want you to be manipulating the DOM and giving back different results every time they index you. So it's very powerful that what we can do, we can actually personalize the site for the user, but Google wants to what is there so they can give broad search terms.
They're also kind of forcing like isometric or isomorphic rendering for search engine optimization. AKA it's best to render something on your server, but not all of it because of magic like this. Because this is a lot harder to do on the server. It's a really easy magic on the client side.
Yeah, it's really, so like PHP was amazing. It's still amazing for this. And like WordPress can handle like, I don't know, maybe 100 requests per second on an optimized thing like dynamic rendering. Whereas like Drupal can do like 12, right? So what happens when Oprah talks about your website and you're running Drupal and 10,000 people hit it in a couple seconds? Your server dies, right? So that's why you need like statically generated and rendered pages. A lot of ways you can do that, right? I'm not going to get into that tonight, but anyways, deviating a little bit. Hope that's information that anyone finds useful. So, all right, gonna jump back in. Keep showing you guys the final result there. All right, so let's just walk through what happened again, because this is I think this is kind of advanced. It's kind of complicated, so I'm just gonna slowly walk through it. Maybe everybody else doesn't, but I think it's important to know because it's weird when you're injecting DOM elements into other DOM elements. Just feels kind of strange to me. So right here, line 10, I'm creating an element strong. I can create a div, right? I can create any tag, and if I was to save that, a div's gonna be inserted, right? Let's just see. You can tell it's a div because it's a block line element and it's pushing it down below the text. Once I have my element, I have access to do a lot of things here, right? What I'm doing is I'm setting the inner text to strong element. But I could also say like, I could do this, right? I could say my element, and I can add an event listener and click. Let's just say alert. So now I can, just for that, so now if I'm clicking the one, I got this really annoying thing on here. If I'm clicking the one, nothing happens. But if I click the strong, I get the hello event, right? So that's pretty powerful. So now it's like if I had a delete button or a pagination button or a fetch request, I can now make that one element there do something, right? Let's just like turn this into like a delete button. So let's just write some JavaScript, CSS delete button. We will make it red because the colors matter. White, width 20 pixels, height 20 pixels, position absolute, top 10 pixels, right 10 pixels. So I'm going to keep following the same patterns I've been using. So I'm going to say myl.classList add. I'm going to add my delete button to it. And I'm going to make my inner text, instead of strong element, an X. Oops. Since I positioned it absolute, I need to make my list items relative. And I'm going to get rid of this toggle for now because it's very annoying. So now I have an X button, right? A delete button. Hello. It's not what that's supposed to do, right? But so you see how much code I had to write to do that? But you can start to see I can start building out a whole entire user interface like this. If I wanted to like create a function to reference somewhere else, like delete this element, pass it the element. I'm just going to say alert hello for now. Instead of like writing that, I can just say delete this. Is that what I called it? Yeah.
You just answered the question I was just about to ask.
Right.
Yeah, that's cool.
And then I can pass, this is super cool, right? I can pass, stop it, see what I did? I told you guys not to do that. All right, I can pass it, delete this element, I can pass it list item, right? So I'm passing it its parent, stop it. And let's delete this and say, I believe I can just say, I think it's the word delete. I might have to Google that one real quick, but let's see. All right. delete element JavaScript. I do this a lot. This is all you have to do. Search the internet for it. Remove is the word I'm looking for. All right, let's see if this works. Something funky. I forgot this is executing. I don't want it to execute. Does any JavaScript pros here know how I get this to not execute?
Parentheses around the whole thing?
I think
Do
so.
like,
I thought that's what it
to
was.
catch the, is it the back arrow and prevent the default?
It could be.
That's just my default kind of like go to. If it's just doing something without you doing anything, it's usually just the event loop kind of just throwing it around here.
Well, instead of messing with it direct, I'm just going to write it directly in here. All right. There you go. All right, so let's just walk through what just happened. Sorry about the little hiccup. Refresh. So I add an event listener to this delete button, and the function is accessing list item, which is above, right? So I'm for eaching through my node list. I still have list item as a variable. List item dot remove. This is the JavaScript for removing an element from the DOM, and now my delete button deletes the node. So there's a lot more that can be done. This is, I think, a pretty good example of that. Anybody have questions before I keep? I'm going to move on to now fetching a request.
Can you zoom in on the code for a little while?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, to me, this is fun, right? This stuff is fun because you get to like, it's like Legos, but way cooler because Legos just do one thing. I still learn things about JavaScript and the DOM every day, I feel like. Maybe every week.
Are you typically working with like vanilla JavaScript rather than with a framework?
No. So before you commit, I'd say like selecting a framework is a commitment. Because once you let a code base out with a framework, you're not going back. You're going to be stuck with that framework, and depending on how big the code base is, you can be stuck with that framework for 10 years. You could be working in it, becomes legacy, and you try to get rid of it, right? Some frameworks are heavy. When I say heavy, it means that they are take a longer time to download, right? So like when jQuery first shipped, I think it was like 180 kilobytes, something insane. That's not insane today, but back in the day, 180 kilobytes moving was a lot, right? Like an MP3 is like 3 megabytes. And now you can stream MP3s from Spotify without even blinking, right? Whereas back in the day, everything you loaded took a while. And there's this like overlord who punishes you for your page load speed, the search engines. But one particularly really punishes you for page load speed. So the faster you can optimize your page, the better. If you have a very small application, if you have a simple page, and you're using jQuery, it's kind of like the browser should also look at you like, what are you doing? You have 6 pieces of text here, but you're loading a 100 kilobyte framework. So that's what I say is you're making a commitment to the framework. So like bigger apps, people use React, they use Vue, Angular, right? They all have their different sizes and weights, and they can be optimized. But that's when you're making a decision like that, you're making a decision for a long time. So if you're just like getting something out the door, doing something simple, if you're comfortable with a framework, use it. I'm not going to say don't use jQuery. If you're good with it and you can get things done, absolutely use it, right? Don't ever like, it's about getting the final product out the door and you doing it in a fast, efficient way where you're happy. So don't ever like try to punish yourself for doing something. Just do what's easy for you and do what's fun. I'm giving the vanilla JavaScript thing because I feel like a lot of people forget that JavaScript is so inherently powerful alone without the need of frameworks. You can do so much. And it's also evolved a lot. So in the last 5 years, JavaScript shipped so many new functionalities that have made the things that frameworks used to make easy, it's even easier with vanilla JavaScript these days. What I'm about to show you, the fetch command, vanilla JavaScript used to take 7 to 12 lines of code to do what we're going to do in 1 line. To do what jQuery gave us a one-liner for this, like the AJAX call. And now they have a get call and a post call and stuff. But that's why people use jQuery so much, because what I'm about to show you was difficult and it was awful to use. It was a terrible experience. Yes?
Have you ever placed a bet on a framework and it worked out for a year or two and it stopped getting maintained?
Absolutely. Yep. Many bets.
Yeah,
some win, some lose, right?
I mean, I'm not at that level, but some people I respect talk about this concept as being powerful in that regard. So if you place your bets on vanilla JavaScript,
yeah, it's not going
be
anywhere.
supported.
Yeah, it's going to be supported no matter what. So another interesting thing is, another awesome thing jQuery did, and MooTools, there's a bunch of frameworks, is they made it they made certain things backwards compatible to other browsers. So about 10 years ago, you had the code to work with browsers that didn't agree with each other. And your website would look different than it would in one browser and another. You still get some of that, but it used to be really bad. We used to maintain different CSS files for different browsers and different JavaScript code for different browsers. That was an awful time to be a web developer, and that's why websites cost so much more money than they do today, because those standards were awful. But yes, everything you pick is going to be obsolete in 3 years, or start to be obsolete. I'll just say that right now.
It's going to be maintained or whatever.
Yeah, if it's still going to be maintained, like jQuery is still maintained, but it's totally, nobody picks jQuery to start a big project anymore, or at least a production project, right?
Yeah.
But React's going to be, it's not going to be around in 3 years. It's going to be something else cool, right? Or there's going to be something better, more efficient, etc. So you just use what you understand, what you like to build with. I would say that. Don't worry about, if you try Vue and React and Angular and you like Angular, use Angular. It's totally cool. Don't stress out about it. Just have fun and know that you have to maintain it for a long time. So, and maybe you don't. Maybe your project will just disappear and you don't have to worry about it.
Maybe you won't be around.
Okay, so I'm now going to jump into the fetch command. So with this fetch command, we created something in Zesty. So here's my plug for what Zesty is. This beautiful wall of text here is a JSON object. And it doesn't really look like much, but it's really a bunch of content that stores information, like company name, description, website, company image. These are the things that we found in that rotational elevator thing, right? So in Zesty is a headless content management system. Makes it really easy to create content like this and plug it into external applications, launch websites, do everything you need on the web that has to do with content. And for this project, we fired up what we call a content instance. We named it WeWork, I think. WeWork Meetup.
And these are free, so if you want to go to zesty.io and create your own instance and plug in your own content, feel free.
Yeah, so if you're building your own app, want to grow something off this, you're welcome to go. Just jump in, Zesty.io, create a website, or create a content instance, and do this. So this is Zesty. Zesty has content, media, code, schema, etc. We're going to focus on content. First, I'll show you we created a schema to enter content, and that schema is company listings. And there's a company name, which is a text field, a company description, which is a WYSIWYG, a company website, which is a URL, an image, company image, which is an image, a company color, which is going to be like a hexadecimal value or a written color like pink or yellow, something the browser will understand, and company logo, which is also an image.
And those are all custom fields that we put together for this example, so you can build whatever you want for your own.
So this is what's cool. I was the developer, threw this up about an hour ago, maybe an hour before this. I put this all together, right? I'm like, Chloe, I don't have time to enter content. I am developing. I created my content model, which I just showed you, and I sent Chloe, I invited Chloe to the instance, and she logged in and she entered all this content for me. And the final result looked like this. So it's taking that information using vanilla JavaScript and creating this loop. And I think it's on like a 2, 3, or 5 second interval. I'm not sure what the interval is, but so it's created all this stuff with everything I just taught you. And I'm going to walk you through how we got there, right? This is a very simple application, I'd say. But it's really cool. Like when you put it in an elevator like that, it has a great effect, right? You have to wait at an elevator. So I think you're going to look at it. You have to wait at a gas station. Are you going to look at the screen? It may annoy you, but you're probably going to look at it. And that's like the base, and then you'll see it'll restart. Cool. All right, you guys ready to do this? Use fetch. I'm going to post this link in the Meetup here. So if you want, you can open that and see. That's the link we're going to use to request against.
That's the same link in your Google Doc?
Let me just double check and make sure it's in there. I don't know if I did put, yes, it's that link there. Yep. There's also something called like JSON reader. I don't know if you use Chrome or Firefox. One of them will have an extension. JSON view is what it's called. That is what makes this look a little bit more legible. If I wasn't viewing it like that, it would, let's see, that's not working. It would look like this. This is human readable, but I consider this machine readable code. So JSON, like a machine could read JSON, it has to parse it and understand it, but it can read it, because it's structured. A human can read it too. You can read it a little bit better when it looks like this. But I'd say JSON is like machine readable code. It's JavaScript, object notation is what it stands for. All right, so, and over here, I'll just look at one of these. You can see company name, the description, the images. So we're going to be fetching that information. Okay, let's jump back in. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we can set, well, we're going to call it an endpoint, right? And I just need to set that string. So that's the URL I'm going to fetch, right? So fetch has some funny commands. Like fetch is super simple. This is all you have to do to fetch. It's so nice, right? And you can like store it like so that's all it is. Super simple, but it gets a little bit complicated, and I'm going to walk you through that. To just show you how it's gotten better, I'm going to show you what it used to look like. Let's see. Bad luck there. Let's look here. Bad luck.
Go back, I think there's a link above that. Go back to the previous search.
This one?
Yeah,
There we go. Oh yeah.
there you go.
There you go. That's what it used to look like. And then you'd have to do a lot of work to catch and see anything that was going bad. But it's powerful. Sometimes it still might make sense to use this depending on what you're doing, right? If you're talking to like an older machine and it doesn't understand certain requests, so you got to remember you're communicating with a machine when you do this. You're not talking to a human. You have to like ask a certain way. Machines are very finicky. If it doesn't like it, it's not going to comply. And it's not typically not all machines are written to give you back good error feedback. It's because the humans don't. They forget that other humans make mistakes. It's not the machine's fault. So yeah, that's what it's pretty rough. So fetch makes it very simple. The thing about fetch though is something about if you guys ever heard of like synchronous and asynchronous, it's a big deal in JavaScript, and it's probably one of the most annoying and difficult things to work with. It's basically about something. If you tell the computer to do something and it has to make a request to a machine, and that machine takes 5 seconds to respond to you, your other code might have executed by the time that responded, right? So if I say, hey Chloe, tell me this, and I say, hey, what's your name? Angelica, tell me that. And you tell me that before Chloe tells me that. Yeah. All right? Who's going to win? I don't know. Chloe might have won that time. You might have won this time. But if I was waiting on your result before Chloe's result made any sense to me, things would break, right? So that's about like asynchronous, synchronous, and like how that works is making sure that you wait for one thing before you do the other thing. So we have to make sure when we make a fetch request, if we are worried about something that's going to follow up, we have to make sure we wait for that request to complete before we start doing other things with our code. And that's where it can get tricky, and we're going to write some code around that. So in this document, at the very end, I have the final code pen here. I'm just going to pull that code up. And you can see it's just running down below. So you can see here that I have my fetch request. Very simple, like right here, but I have it in an async function. That allows me to wait for it. So I'm just going to copy that into our running example because there's too much code here for me to work off this. We can come back to this after and walk through it. So I'm going to type an async function, get results, and then in that that's where I'm going to have my fetch. Let me paste in. So there's kind of a newer keyword in JavaScript called await. You used to have to do something like that was called a promise. Promise is not a good time in JavaScript, in my opinion. It's very complicated. They now have like try catches and awaits, so that's kind of nice. So we're going to use the await command. Does anyone? Yep.
So you're saying promises are a little bit separate way to handle asynchronous requests?
It's the same. There are two different ways to do it. So like there's a new, which I prefer because I prefer this. You can do like a try catch now, which you couldn't really do before, and you can run awaits inside of there. And you can use try catch to like what promises used to be able to catch and handle. Like promises, you'd essentially juggle like a whole bunch of functions in a long row, and you can get down like promise hell, essentially. I mean, if anyone's coded in promises, you know it can get really ugly. But this is a lot simpler, so everything I do now is I use asynchronous functions, and I just await them. You can only await an asynchronous function, so it's really important to know. So just for the purpose of seeing this go off before I start writing on the code. Let's just see if we can console log. I know code, it's going to get mad because it's too much. But let's just see if we can get this to fire off. Oops. Get results. All right, so in my console, you can see the results, right? And it's that giant object that we were looking at. Start to see the content, right? So that to me was a far simpler experience than this old school requests side of JavaScript.
Why do you have to do the 2 awaits on line 128 and 1?
Because they're both asynchronous functions. What we're going to do is return await. So JSON, as awesome as it is ugly. And like, let me just show you this again. Right, if I do view source, a computer has to parse, that's a string, right? At the end of the day, it's just a blob of text. The computer has to like split apart all those curly braces and everything and build it into an object that a computer understands. That's parsing, right? JSON always has to be parsed. That takes a long time, not to us, right? If I had to parse that, good luck. I would like quit life, become an alcoholic. It'd be done. I couldn't do it. I mean, a computer can do that in like, 10, 5 milliseconds, 2 milliseconds, depending on what you're working on. But that's still 10 milliseconds, right? Could be 5, whatever. When you're doing 1 billion requests a month like we do at Zesty, that time adds up, and that's processing time, and it hurts, and it costs money. So that's why there's an await in front of it, because it still has to wait for the computer to figure it out. And the bigger that object is, the longer it still has to figure it out, for what it's worth. So that's why that is just not like an instant function. It actually is awaiting it because it needs to do more work than we think, for what it's worth. There's a long story to tell you why, but I think it's important to note, like, JSON is awesome, but it still requires processing power. There are other things out there that Wei's been studying that don't require that type of power. But people don't really understand how to use them because they're harder to use, I'd say.
Yes.
So is that unique too if you have a JSON response? Like if you were getting a response of a different type, would it still require that?
It may require more or less parsing. Typically, you still have to parse it unless like it's sent as an object that the other computer already understands. So like there are other protocols that make requests in the object form that the other computer already understands, and it doesn't have to parse it as much, for what it's worth. There's always some level of parsing, I'd say, Wei, right?
The reason why JSON takes so much effort to parse, usually by something that's not JavaScript, is because JSON is a recursive structure. Are you guys familiar with recursion? So you could basically like have a JSON object that's like 1,000 layers deep, and you'll never know when to stop until you reach like your base case, right? Which is why JSON is so, well, that's one thing. And also, JSON also doesn't have it's not strictly typed in a certain way. Like, you can have an array of JSON objects that have different structures. So you have to figure out how to deal with those different structures too. Yeah, JSON is.
It's like a box of chocolates, Wei,
Yeah,
would you say?
it's like a box of chocolates. Literally, you're never gonna get it.
But can we admit that it's better than, maybe slightly better to at least work with than XML, or what are you guys' thoughts on that?
No, I'm not. I'm just saying that's why it has to await, because it has some things to do. We write all of our. I guess JSON's kind of the way everybody builds everything these days, right? Probably that'll change in 10 years. There may be another standard, but that's the current standard. But it still takes some memory to process it. But yeah, XML obviously is a bulkier, maybe nastier way, and that was like from the 90s to like 2005 was the more popular way. Now 2005 to 2000, maybe 20, right? There's some new stuff coming out that might replace it. That's what Wei's been checking out. Their website's really bad, but the code is good. All right, so good deviation. Hope you're all learning from this. Okay, so the thing about asynchronous functions and awaits is you can only await inside of a function. And I'm not going to write another function here because it's too much work. So the only way I can follow up after calling get results, because it has because it's asynchronous, I have to type then. And you guys have probably seen this. If you've worked with promises, you've definitely seen then, right? Anyone know then? If not, I'll just show you how it works. And then from then, we can say like results. And then we can say, try to console log the results and see what we get. And you can see my results are now, I have an object I can now do things with. Okay, so now this results object is this, but prettier. So what we're going to do is we're going to start looking through that for data we can use and building some HTML DOM elements. So we're going to start repeating a lot of the stuff that we just all learned, right? So I'm going to start by creating a shell over here. I'll call this div shell, and I'll give it a class called companies. And now I want access to the companies, right? So I'm going to say document.get, query selector. I can trust that I only have one companies because I know I do. So now I'm inside of results. Just to show you that I have access to that object, I could say companies.append child. And I'm going to say like, if you guys are seeing me write let is a different way to write a variable within the scope that you have it. Sorry, that's the better way to do it, but you can just write var. I'm trying to stay consistent. So var li equals document dot create element li dot inner text. Hello. I'm going to get rid of my console log because it probably doesn't like that. So you can see I'm adding hello inside of my companies. So I selected this up above, outside of the scope of this object, of this function, but I can always access it now here out. Anywhere below this, I can access this company's object. And this is a div element. So now we're going to take our results, right? I know in my results I have, inside of there I have something called data. Just to show you that. You can see I have, in my object, I have two top-level elements, or data and meta. And data is an array. So I'm gonna for each through data, right? So I'm going to say results data, right? And then I'm going to go for each. And inside of there is, say, like a zesty content item. And I'm using my shorthand code to write a function. I believe they call this, is it the fat arrow is what they call it?
Yeah.
It's a great name for something. Like, they have all these weird names.
I thought it was the arrow function.
The arrow function?
Yeah.
I don't know what the JavaScript kiddies are calling it these days, but
It's just a shorthand way of instantiating an anonymous function. So that's very key.
so you could do it like this.
They're equivalent.
Yeah,
And
this
arrow and fat arrow functions. It's the same thing.
yeah, this is prettier, and I think you still have access to this in the scope above it when you do it this way. But let's just keep going here. So I should have like 5 objects. Just to confirm, I'm going to see if this is going to add 5 LIs.
That might be 6.
Oh, did you just add one?
I might have.
Let's see.
Cause it's dynamic.
This is where I don't know if I can trust CodePen. This happened to me earlier, and it just wasn't being compliant. So I'm going to move into my local development environment because CodePen can be weird. So I'm just creating an HTML file. I'm going to scaffold it out. So
you find problems with CodePen on the synchronous function?
it can get weird, and like it's one thing to refresh and keep trying, but it's another thing to like know that it's broken. And it's hard to know like if it's you that broke it or if CodePen's acting weird, so I just can't trust that right now.
That's good to know.
Yeah, it can get, like I noticed like it wasn't rendering something for me, it was rendering for Chloe, and the code hadn't changed. So what I'm doing is I'm just going to create like I'm essentially going to mimic the CodePen environment, and I'm going to create a single HTML body. And I'm going to have my I can just wrap the JavaScript I wrote in a script tag. And I'm going to wrap the styles I wrote inside of a style tag. And fortunately, I don't have much HTML, so it's quite simple. All right. So I just mimic that environment, and I'm going to reveal in my Finder and open it in browser. All right, so looks like it could have been me. What's up? All right, so it was us. So now what I need to do is I need to come here and refresh every time I make a code change.
There's a nice plugin called Live Server that you can use in Visual Studio as well.
Is it?
Yeah. Really simple. You just need to go to the extensions icon down there on the left panel.
This
The
one?
icons. Yes.
What's it called?
Live
Mm-hmm.
Server. Yeah. Visual. And then you can see the icon, the bottom right, go live.
Yep.
But you need to select the index HTML. Yeah.
Nice. So it'll just refresh for me.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So let's console log this, see if we're getting it. So console.logging is definitely your friend when debugging.
Yes.
Google is also your friend. It's always your friend, especially if you have a Google Home in your house. Okay. All right, so we are in a good place now, and I will just walk you through what happened. I had something out of scope, and so our function to get the results is pretty simple. It's an asynchronous function. We're casting results in an await fetch, Endpoint is a string, which is the URL of where our JSON lives. And then we await as we convert the results into parse JSON, which returns a JSON object. When we call get results, since we're at the top level in JavaScript, we can't await this. We could if we were inside a function, but since we are at top level JavaScript, we need to call it and then hit then. And then with what we're returning, which is the JavaScript object, we're creating a function where we pass the JavaScript object into this function. Results, I know, has data and meta. Data is the actual content I want to work with. So results.data, and I'm going to for each it because data is an array of content objects, particularly Zesty content objects or items. So I'm going to go through each object in the array. I'm calling it Zesty content item. And then I'm going to do something with that content item. To test to see if this was working, I created a list item, gave it some text, and I appended it to companies, which is the parent object, the DOM object, which is here. So you can see that we have 6 companies, and we appended 6 hellos. All right, so I'm going to stop there because I'm going to get into writing lots of code, to kind of fill this out and make it become like the WeWork page. But I'm going to stop and just give an opportunity to answer questions or for me to go back over this, or if anyone has anything before I keep going. No?
Can you explain what more about the objects that's coming back from our await, like from the Zesty.io?
Yeah, so Zesty will...
Like how would I know if I were just getting this from somebody, if somebody said, this, other than obviously console.log in the object, is there like a simple format that we should be looking at to, like, whenever we're getting JSON data like this? Or? Yeah,
so typically we follow some conventions.
Yeah.
Typically you're going to look at it. You're going to use something like this JSON view and read it like this first. You can, console logging, it's good. The browser now is pretty much a developer tool, and I'll give you back information. But one of the conventions that's pretty standard is all JSON objects have top-level data, and data is typically an array. Even if data has one item, it's typically an array. And that's what you can expect to be consistent. So in the Zesty, this Zesty particularly, we call this our instant JSON API. So the second you create anything in Zesty, you have access to this immediately. So you can start building things. Within 5 minutes, you can fire up Zesty, create a shell, enter content, and have access to fuel a dynamic app, just like this. And the object that we give you has a lot more information than you're probably going to need. But if you were going to do more complex things, you have all the information you need. So in each object, we give you meta, which is kind of like high-level information about the object, a version, what version you're on, and information about that version. In Zesty, we track every version of content ever made. So that way you can go back and compare versions. You can A/B test with it. You can do cool stuff with it. And then content, which is going to be the, most of this stuff, like there's parent ZUID, sitemap priority. Enough information is here for you to build a whole entire HTML DOM element that Google will like. We actually auto-generate you a web page with this information as well. But if you were going to build something headlessly, you could use this to your advantage. So most of this information we're not going to use for our application. It doesn't care about the web. It cares about people in an elevator. So I don't care if Google reads that. So I'm just creating a single page headless app, not very complicated for SEO. What I do care about is under content, I have company name, description, website, company image, and you can see our image object is a little bit more complicated. That's because you could have multiple images, so we need to have, and we're following the same convention. So when that's the case, images have data, and data is an array, even if it's just one.
So to pause that for a second, I see a pattern. I'm just trying to make sure that where else is there? So you have meta for the entire package JSON, and then each individual item has a metadata, or do you
Correct.
know what I mean? Is there any other metadata that comes along with even the images, or again, that's conventionally speaking, whenever we're looking at JSON?
Not necessarily. This is the way we do it. Like
But you could set it if you wanted to. Like you could add more fields, like image name or whatever alt text you wanted.
Right.
If you wanted to autofill that as well.
Yeah, you can set relationships. Did you do this? No. Yeah, you can set all sorts of things in Zesty, and we just automatically build you this object that lets you do whatever you want.
Yeah.
But yeah, the standard stuff, typically the only standard thing is data and an array of objects. That's kind of the most standard JSON you should expect. But looking at this, you can see company name is the first thing I'm going to access. And I know that in data goes to object, and that object there's meta, content, and version. So I'm going to go data, object, content, company name. So instead of saying hello here, I'm going to say Zesty content item dot content dot company name. I'm going to hit save here, and now you can see I have a list of the company names. So now we're just going to keep using everything I just taught you. I'm just going to keep using it in circles essentially to build out the page. And I'm going to write some CSS so it's not yellow on red. Maybe we'll do like blue on purple. So what I'm going to end up doing is just a series of so I'm looping through each item. And I'm going to be creating a top level element inside companies. So really, I'm going to start fresh and I'm going to create this in a company div. So I'm going to say company div, and this is going to be div. Really, it's going to be a slide. Let's call it company slide, which is a div. And I'm going to add a class to this. So I'm going to use classlist.add, and I'm going to call it slide. The first thing is going to be my h1. So I'm going to create an element h1. I'm just swapping out the li I had before because it didn't make sense to have an li there. h1. So company slide is the thing I want to put into company, right? So companies, I need a company slide in company. So how that's done is I want to access companies here. And then I'm going to say append child, right? 'Cause that's my child element, parent child. You can do things like get parent, things like that. We're not going there tonight, but we're going to append the company slide into companies. But now we have this h1, which I created, but I haven't done anything with it, right? So I'm just going to say, what do you think I need to do with this h1? Anybody? I haven't appended it anywhere, so where do I want to append my h1?
Into the company's slide.
Correct. I'm pretty much company slide is like my little package, and I'm going to just keep adding things into it, and then at the end I'm going to throw company slide into the DOM. So I'm going to say company slide append child h1, and let's just see what my results look like. Now I have a bunch of, these are h1s, right, default.
Thing is, like you were saying, if you just picture the DOM in your mind, that's all you're doing, you're manipulating the DOM.
Yeah, that's it.
So as long as you know the HTML.
Right. Well, it's the thing. I've been doing this for a long time, and it's just not very. You get used to it, right? The more you do, it's just like anything, playing the piano or riding a bike. It's the same concept. You can't just be good at it overnight. You could start working on it and work all night and get better at it, right? That's how you can be better at it overnight. Literally, don't go to sleep. Just keep working. It's hours. You got to put hours into it. It's true.
And then don't do it for 2 years, and then you're Googling for all the same things.
I still Google. When I code, I probably Google like, not as much as I used to. It's faster not to Google, but I still end up Googling things, just natural. Especially when you're coding like 6 different languages in a given day. All right, so I need to add my content, right? So there's some cool little hacks you can do. So I'm gonna make like one, I'm gonna say let content equal document dot create element. See how like redundant this is? There's nothing you can really do about this, but it's just gonna be redundant, and that's life. And I'm gonna add a class list. Here's another thing that can be weird is like I wanna call my class content, which is fine, but like you see how we get like content is coming up a lot. It's just, that's gonna happen, and it's okay. So then I can say content dot, this is like a nice little hack, inner HTML. So I can do a lot with this now. So there's something new in JavaScript called the string literal, and it's one of my favorite things that's happened to JavaScript in the last 10 years. So this is a string literal. Anything I write in here is going to show up. Like, I'm going to say hello class because that's what it feels like. Why am I not getting anything? Because I did not append my child. All right.
Are those apostrophes or backticks?
Backticks, those are backticks.
Okay.
Good question.
Way in the top left corner of the keyboard.
Yeah, top left corner.
Yeah.
It's only so many things. They're just trying to find whatever they can. So you can see I'm appending that. So now inside of here, I can do cool things like I can access company description this way. So there's some like lazy hacks. I'm not going to tell you it's right or wrong, but I'll show you how to do it. So see how I'm getting my description now? I think it's good to know about hacks because when it comes time to use them, you can use them. And you can know why they're called hacks, right? So if I want to, I can literally, instead of creating DOM elements and writing create element all the time, I can just do this. Some people may get really mad at you for this, but it's okay. And so what I'm doing is I'm just like raw writing HTML, right? It's totally natural. So see how I'm building out each one of these? Ooh, CoinMarketCap. I'm gonna go ahead and delete some of this older code because I don't need it. I'll just focus on the new stuff. Actually, I'll keep it, but I don't need that. Okay, so now I just have what I have here. Really important, right? This is my HTML body. It's one line of code, like div, class, companies. I'm using JavaScript to manipulate and create a dynamic page, like on the fly.
Would you even need that? Because couldn't you use JavaScript to add that div?
You totally could. Yeah, 100%. I could create element top level and yeah, absolutely. Because you still have access to the document.body, right? So technically you don't even need to write any HTML. That'd be totally elite. All right, so there's also a company logo that shows up. So I'm creating an H1 here. Like literally, instead of doing this, right, I can, in my string literal. So this wasn't really possible before. I can just do this, which is kind of nice. Same effect. So I can kind of write anything I want in here. There's a company, there's a logo, I think. So, and what's it, was it company
Company underscore.
logo? And then since we have it, I know what this is in Zesty. If you were doing it for the first time, you'd have to look it up. But that's how we access the image URL. Let's see what happens. Boom. Yeah, so that right there, like company logo, data, 0, URL, that is not magic. That is literally just how, right? I'm just drilling into it. Company logo, dot data. Data is an array, so I have to get the first one in the array, which is 0, and then dot URL. That's how I got that. All right, so how do I make it slide? Animation. So I'm going to start using some CSS. So basically I have my framework. I guess I need a couple more things. I had this right-handed slide. Just going to do this div. Right image. There's like 100 ways to use CSS and HTML, which is awesome about it. But it also makes it hard to look at other people's code. I'm going to say background. Has anyone ever coded something this way before, by the way? Yeah, you have? Yeah. So, but just one person in the room, which means like, this is vanilla JavaScript. It's pretty cool, pretty powerful. You can do some awesome things with it, like with not that much code.
You're talking about using the inner HTML with backticks?
Yeah, backticks, string literals, for eaches, the fetch command, right? Like we're combining 6 concepts here that makes it really fun to work with.
The only tool that I can recognize that you're not using because of brand new JavaScript is you don't really, whenever I've written some practice projects in vanilla JavaScript is like ifs, where you have to do the immediately invoke the function expressions to encapsulate like private information. AKA you could do that here, but
yeah, I'm just not
worried
doing
about
it
it being leaked out. But that's
I'm not even.
They don't really see ifs used whenever you're like using like frameworks and Node and stuff that often. You know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't. So it'd be good to. You can give a. Yeah, the next one. Oh, you just signed yourself up. Ifs. Alright. I'm going to just put the image here. So what I'm doing, there's a company image too. It's just a square right now. Doesn't look like much. But you can see the image. So I believe I have all the things I need to now construct my slider. So what I didn't talk about in vanilla JavaScript was CSS. So we're going to do some CSS stuff. CSS is a whole nother beast. And we're going to just kind of work with some absolute positioning and stuff to make it work. No longer need a delete button or yellow background. So right now I have no styles. So what matters to me first, so I'm just going to look at our DOM just to get an idea of what we're working with, because we're writing it in code. Sometimes for me, I'm a visual person. I like to see it visually. I mean, this is still text, but it's more visual than the other stuff we're writing. And you can see top level, I have a div, which is companies. And inside of that, I have 6 slides, right? Those are also divs. So what I want to do here is just like, I want to make company a full box, right? Or companies. And then inside of that box, I have 6 slides, right? I essentially want to make the slide a box the same size as the company box, slide 1. Or this could be slide 6, depending. Behind slide 1, I want another box. That's how I'm going to represent this. This might get confusing. But essentially, I'm going to have 6 boxes behind each other. And I'd call this slide 2, slide 3, slide 4. Like 1, 2, 3, 4. There's going to be 6, but essentially they're going to be layered on top of each other, right? So we're going to pretend like it's Photoshop, but it's not, but it is. So I'm going to make the slides essentially all be the same size, so they're on top of each other. All right, so this probably is more complicated than all the JavaScript I just showed you. CSS gets weird. You got to think about it in dimensions. So what's important is that I set up some things. So I have companies, which is a class on the div, right? And then I created a div that's content, right? So div, and I added a class content, and I created that like large slide one, and I gave it the class slide. So essentially, I'm working with companies. Yep. So yeah. So companies. And then I'm working with slide, and then I'm working with content, right? Content is inside a slide, so you don't have to do this, but visually it helps, right? So inside of companies, I'm going to position this fixed. Anyone familiar with CSS here? A little bit. Anyone familiar with like positioning? Positioning essentially lets it free of the DOM, and it lets you put it wherever you want, right? So I'm gonna put it top left, right? And I'm just gonna show you this for example for you guys to understand. Background, I'm just gonna call it gray, right? The DOM looks like a complete mess right now, right? It'll get better. So what I did is I positioned it left 0 at 0 pixels and top, and I gave it a width of, I think, 200 pixels, 100 pixels, right? So if I gave that a width of like 600 pixels, right? Now it's 600 pixels, right? I can give this a width of 1,000%. It's going to go all the way. There's another cool trick, which some people may say you're a hack for, but I think it's awesome. You can also say right 0 pixels. So I'm saying go left 0 and right 0, and essentially just stretching it to the left and right at 0 pixels at all times, no matter what. It's a pretty nice trick. So you could do this too, right? You can create like a 10 pixel box around by doing that. This only works if you're using absolute or fixed positioning. I want to stretch it edge to edge because this is an edge to edge thing.
Couldn't you, just out of curiosity, does that do the same thing as newer CSS, the view width? 100 view width?
It
which
does.
Is at least, well, I mean,
yeah.
Both of these options are dynamic.
I think you may be able to do like view width in here, like you may be able to say this. Right.
Well, wouldn't bottom be view height?
So.
Wouldn't that make? Oh yeah. Wait, yeah. Wouldn't you want? If you're
Oh
top,
yeah.
bottom, view height.
Let's see. Yeah.
Unless you wanted some weird sort of.
So that's 10% off the bottom, right? Using new CSS. We're going old school.
I think this is a clever solution, but the nice new modern thing is that you have that responsive view.
Yeah, you could do this. You could do that. You totally could. I'm going forced though. We're going to the edge. All right, so now we have slides inside of there. So you can see these slides are kind of lining up here. So there's a couple ways I can do it. I could just start by saying width 100%. And let me just give it a background so you know what we're working with. And you can see like I have, if we inspect this, you can see like that one, you kind of can see it. There you go. But I'm going to use kind of the same trick that I did before. I'm going to say absolute. Position absolute. Has anyone ever done positioning like this before? Yeah. And I'm just going to follow the same trick. Take care.
I think the funny thing is that in like 5 years, most people are going to know like Flexbox and Grid as like their basic
Yeah,
The only
they'll
way
have.
to do CSS.
Right.
Has anybody else done Flexbox?
So not Flexbox, but like after using Bootstrap, I've never gone back. I'm also too like using the Bootstrap.
That uses all like position fix.
I mean, but like using the Bootstrap first.
Yeah, the Bootstrap principle is kind of thinking that isn't that like naming conventions to create grids and stuff?
I think it performs calculation too.
Yeah.
It's using like, it calculates the percentages based on the, it uses like the 12, I think it's like a 12 by 12 grid system.
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
Right, so it uses the positions to calculate the percentage space, but yeah, I mean, I don't do much Python, so.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to keep writing CSS. So I did the same thing, positioned absolute. Did all these, background white. And now you can see I can only see one, right? If I was to like inspect this and delete, you can see that they're all layered on top of each other now. And I don't know, how am I doing time-wise? Is it totally over?
It's 8, so.
So yeah, I can, for those who want to stay, stay. If you need to go, don't worry about making noise and stuff. It's all good. Do we care, well, first, do you guys want to see this keep going, or where are you at? Is this enough for you? We're good, some are good, some, yes or no?
Yes, let's do it.
Let's do it, all right, keep going. All right, cool.
Either keep going or describe your solution, because there's still a lot of different ways that you can approach even where you're at. I mean, I'm pretty, like, I'm curious to see.
Yeah, so I'm trying to just keep it simple and use what I have access to really quickly. So we want to get the slide to slide over with what's called, you have transition, right? Transition, and you could say how many milliseconds, right? So I'm going to go 200 milliseconds. I'm going to say I want left transition. So you can say transition all, and it'll listen for any CSS change and slowly like transition and fade that. So all I care about is my value left, and then 200 milliseconds, and I think I can write like ease in, ease out. This is like, gives that elastic like slide out effect, right? All right, so, and I'm going to show you what that's going to do. So I'm inspecting that, and I'm going to add a style that is left 100%. Is that the right one? Right here. Left 100, whoops, %. Whoa, that was fast, right? 0. So if I want to give it like a little bit easier of a transition, that was like 200 milliseconds is like 20% of a second. I'm going to give it 2 seconds, which is maybe too much. So we'll go left 100%. Woo. So what I'm going to do is say slide. It's funny because I'm changing left, but I'm actually sliding to the right. So I'm going to call slide right, and I'm going to give my left. I'm going to give it a left position of 100%.
Which makes sense,
Right.
Yeah, because you're just going.
Pushing it. Yeah, pushing it. So now what I'm going to do is I need the trigger to add this on an interval, or I could do it on click, right? So let's just go, now we're going to go back into the JavaScript, right? And we have this whole slide, and I'm just going to do add event listener just to show you how it's going to start to work. Click, and on that click, I'm going to write a function, which I'm going to target this, and I can say class list dot add. What did I call it? Slide right? All right. See?